My brother's fiancée had an obsession with me, and it destroyed everything. If you told me years ago that my older brother would cut me out of his life forever because of a woman, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I am, watching my family fall apart over something I had no control over. It all started when my brother, Marcus, met Ivy in college. Marcus and I have always been close, we're only a year apart, so growing up, we did everything together. Same schools, same sports, same interests. When it came time for college, we even ended up at the same university. That's where he met Ivy. She was charming, confident, and, at first, seemed perfect for him. They clicked almost instantly, and before long, they were inseparable. Since Marcus and I shared an apartment, Ivy was around all the time. Naturally, I got to know her too. At first, I had no problem with her. She was friendly, talkative, and seemed like a good match for my brother. I wanted him to be happy, and if Ivy was the one for him, then great. But over time, I started to notice things that made me uncomfortable. Ivy was too familiar with me. The way she interacted with me didn't feel like a sister-in-law relationship, it felt off. She was constantly finding reasons to touch my arm, laugh at my jokes more than necessary, or ask me personal questions that felt weird coming from my brother's girlfriend. At first, I told myself I was overthinking things. Maybe she was just trying to bond with me since she was serious about Marcus. But then my girlfriend started pointing it out. More than once, a girl I was dating would tell me that Ivy made them feel unwelcome or that she acted territorial whenever they were around. One night, after a small get-together at our apartment, my girlfriend at the time, Samantha, told me straight up. "I don't think Ivy likes me." I laughed it off and asked why she thought that. "She glares at me when you're not looking. She keeps making little comments, like she's trying to make me feel like I don't belong here. And the way she acts around you, it's weird." I was caught off guard but brushed it off. Maybe Sam was just being insecure. But then, as I kept dating, the same pattern emerged. Different girlfriends of mine told me the exact same thing. Ivy would question them aggressively, act overly possessive of my time, and in some cases, flat out lie to them about me. One of my most serious relationships in college, Rebecca, ended because of Ivy. Rebecca had been amazing. I really saw a future with her. But one day, out of nowhere, she broke up with me. I was blindsided. When I asked why, she said, "I don't think I can deal with your brother's girlfriend being around you all the time. She acts like she owns you." I was confused. "What do you mean?" That's when she told me the truth. Ivy had been bullying her behind my back. She would mock Rebecca's appearance, make snide comments about her intelligence, and even plant doubts in her mind about me. But the worst part? Ivy lied to Rebecca, telling her that I was cheating on her when I absolutely wasn't. And Rebecca believed her. I confronted Ivy immediately. At first, she denied everything, but when I pressed her, she admitted it without shame. "She wasn't right for you," Ivy said casually. "I was just protecting you from a bad relationship." I was speechless. "That wasn't your decision to make, Ivy." She just shrugged and said, "One day, you'll thank me." I told Marcus about it, hoping he would understand why this was completely inappropriate. But he brushed it off. "Ivy is just protective of you, that's all. Maybe she went too far, but she cares about you like a sister." That was the moment I realized. My brother was blind to who Ivy really was. But that was just the beginning of the nightmare. A year later, Marcus and Ivy were still together, and I had learned to keep my distance. I was polite when I had to be, but I no longer engaged with Ivy the way I used to. Then, I met Natalie. And that's when things got worse. Natalie was different. She wasn't just another college girlfriend, she was the one. From the moment we met, I knew I wanted to build a life with her. She was strong, kind, and didn't put up with nonsense. When she met Ivy for the first time, she immediately sensed what I had been ignoring for years. "She has a thing for you," Natalie said one night after a family dinner. "It's obvious." I sighed. "She's with Marcus. That doesn't make any sense." "Exactly. And yet she acts like you're her boyfriend." I still didn't want to believe it. Then, Ivy did something unforgivable. She invited the whole family to dinner one weekend. But when Natalie and I showed up, we realized Ivy had deliberately chosen a seafood restaurant, knowing full well that Natalie was allergic to shellfish. I was livid. Natalie and I refused to eat there. When I confronted Ivy, she smirked and said, "Oh, I didn't realize her allergy was that serious." Natalie stood her ground. "You knew exactly what you were doing," she said coldly. My parents finally saw Ivy's true colors that night. They were disgusted by her petty, jealous behavior and supported me when I said I would no longer tolerate Ivy's nonsense. But Marcus? He defended her. "She just made a mistake." "You're overreacting," he said. I told Marcus that if Ivy couldn't respect the woman I loved, then I didn't want her in my life. That was the start of the real fracture between us. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened at Marcus and Ivy's engagement party. That was the night Ivy destroyed everything. Marcus and Ivy's engagement party was supposed to be a celebration of love. Instead, it turned into a complete and utter disaster. I hadn't been looking forward to the event. By this point, I had been keeping my distance from Ivy for months. I only interacted with her when necessary, and I had made it clear that I didn't appreciate the way she treated Natalie, or me. Marcus, of course, was in denial about everything. "Ivy's trying to make things right," he had told me weeks before the party. "She's just upset that you two aren't as close as you used to be." Close? There was never a time when Ivy and I were close. It was always one-sided. She was the one pushing boundaries, interfering in my relationships, and acting like I was hers instead of Marcus's. Despite my reservations, I decided to attend the engagement party for Marcus's sake. I didn't want to create unnecessary drama. Besides, my parents and extended family were going, and I figured as long as I had Natalie with me, I could tolerate Ivy for one night. I had no idea what was about to unfold. The party was at a large venue Ivy's family had rented. It was beautifully decorated, with flowers, fairy lights, and an open bar. The second I walked in, I noticed Ivy staring at me. She barely acknowledged Marcus. Instead, her eyes locked onto me like she had been waiting for me to show up. I brushed it off and focused on spending time with my parents and cousins. Natalie and I mingled, trying to enjoy ourselves despite the tension hanging in the air. But the more the night went on, the more Ivy drank. She was taking shot after shot, her cheeks flushed red as she moved from group to group, increasingly fixated on me. At one point, she walked over to Natalie and me and tried to squeeze between us. "Why have you been ignoring me?" Ivy slurred, her eyes glassy from alcohol. "We used to be such good friends." I took a step back. "Ivy, I've been here for an hour, and I haven't ignored anyone," I said calmly. Natalie, however, wasn't having it. "You've been staring at him all night," she pointed out. "Maybe you should pay more attention to your fiancé instead." Ivy's expression darkened. Then, she laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Oh, Marcus," she scoffed, glancing across the room where my brother was chatting with friends. "Yeah, sure. Whatever." The way she said it sent a chill down my spine. Before I could respond, she reached for my arm, gripping it in a way that felt too intimate, too desperate. "I need to talk to you. Alone." "Nope. I don't think that's a good idea," I said immediately. Natalie stepped forward, her expression full of warning. "He's not going anywhere with you, Ivy," she said firmly. Ivy rolled her eyes. "Oh, relax. I just need to clear the air. It's not like I'm going to steal him." Natalie's jaw clenched, and I could tell she was seconds away from losing her patience. "You already tried," Natalie shot back. "You spent years trying." For a brief second, Ivy looked furious. But then she composed herself, let go of my arm, and gave me one last look before stumbling away. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The moment that changed everything happened during the speeches. Marcus stood at the front of the room, a microphone in hand, thanking everyone for coming. Ivy stood beside him, swaying slightly from how much she had been drinking. Then, in the middle of his speech, Ivy grabbed the microphone out of his hands. The room went silent. For a moment, Marcus laughed awkwardly, thinking she just wanted to say something sweet. But Ivy's first words sent shockwaves through the entire room. "I've been living a lie," she announced, her voice slurred but clear. Marcus frowned. "Ivy, what are you?" She ignored him and turned toward me. "I can't do this anymore," she continued, her eyes locked onto mine. "I've loved you for years, and I can't pretend I don't. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My entire family was staring at me. Natalie's hand tightened around mine. My brother? He looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. But Ivy wasn't done. I only stayed with Marcus because it was the closest I could get to you, she admitted, her voice shaking. I thought if I waited long enough, you'd realize we were meant to be together. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My mother gasped. My father's face turned bright red with anger. I wanted to disappear. And then Ivy said the most horrifying thing of all. Please, she begged, her voice cracking. Leave Natalie and be with me. We can run away together. I'll make you happy, I swear. At that moment, everything fell apart. Marcus stumbled backward, his face white as a sheet. Natalie let go of my hand, completely stunned. Ivy burst into tears, but instead of running to Marcus, she reached for me. I took 2 steps back. You're insane, I muttered. The crowd erupted into whispers and gasps. Ivy's sister ran up to the front and yanked the microphone away from her. Ivy, stop it. You're humiliating yourself. But Ivy was hysterical. He's the love of my life, she screamed, clutching her chest. He's supposed to be mine. Marcus finally seemed to snap out of his shock. We're done, he said coldly. Ivy froze. What? I said we're done, Marcus repeated, his voice void of emotion. You just confessed, in front of everyone, that you never loved me. We're over. And just like that, the engagement was over. But what I didn't realize in that moment was, Marcus wasn't just going to cut Ivy out of his life. He was going to cut me out, too. After Ivy's drunken confession at the engagement party, everything fell apart. The aftermath was brutal. Marcus broke off the engagement immediately and kicked Ivy out of his life. Our entire family was in shock, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I figured my brother and I would talk things through eventually. That never happened. Instead, Marcus disappeared. He stopped answering my calls, ignored my texts, and went completely no contact with me. I wasn't the only one. He cut off our parents, our cousins, and our childhood friends. None of us understood why. At first, I thought he just needed time to heal. I mean, his fiancée, someone he had planned to spend his life with, had just humiliated him in front of his entire family and friends. But as the months turned into years, it became clear that Marcus wasn't coming back. Even when I got married to Natalie, one of the most important days of my life, he wasn't there. I tried reaching out. Again and again. But Marcus wanted nothing to do with me. It hurt. More than I wanted to admit. Because despite everything, he was still my brother. And I missed him. Then, out of nowhere, 5 years later, Marcus called me. I was shocked when I saw his name pop up on my phone. For a second, I hesitated. What did he want after all these years? I answered immediately. Marcus? The first few moments were awkward. We hadn't spoken in so long that it was hard to know where to start. But I was just relieved to hear his voice. I'm getting married, Marcus finally said. I blinked. Wow. That's great, man. Congratulations. I meant it. After everything that had happened, I was genuinely happy that he had moved on. Thanks, he said, his voice neutral. The wedding's in a few months. I wanted to invite you. Hearing that felt like a weight lifting off my chest. Maybe this was it. Maybe he was finally ready to be my brother again. That means a lot, Marcus. Of course, I'd love to come. I was already thinking about how this could be a new beginning for us. A chance to fix what had been broken. But then, Marcus said something that made my stomach drop. You can come, he said. But you can't come empty-handed. I laughed, thinking he was making a joke about wedding gifts. Obviously, I'll get you and your fiancée something nice, I said lightly. But Marcus's voice was dead serious. I'm not talking about a regular gift, he said. I need you to give me $50,000. I felt like I had misheard him. What? You owe me, he said, his tone cold. I let out a small, disbelieving laugh. Marcus, what the hell are you talking about? Then, he laid it all out. According to him, I owed him $50,000 as compensation for what happened 5 years ago. For stealing Ivy from him. He went on a full rant, saying that because of Ivy's confession, he had lost his reputation, suffered humiliation, and wasted years of his life on a relationship that was doomed from the start. He blamed me. Not Ivy. Me. You should have known she was in love with you, he spat. You should have done something to stop it before it got to that point. I was in complete disbelief. Marcus, I never encouraged Ivy. I never wanted anything to do with her. That doesn't matter, he snapped. You should have pushed her away harder. You should have made it clear that she had no chance. But you let her hang around, and in the end, I was the one who paid for it. I ran a hand down my face, trying to process what I was hearing. And the $50,000? I asked. Where does that come in? His answer? He said that over the years he spent with Ivy, he had invested time and money into their relationship. Trips. Gifts. Engagement expenses. He calculated that he had spent at least $50,000 on her. And since I was the reason it all fell apart, I should pay him back for it. I was speechless. Was this a joke? Had Marcus lost his mind? You're telling me you want $50,000 from me, I said slowly. Because your ex-fiancée was obsessed with me? Yes, Marcus said without hesitation. That's exactly what I'm saying. You're insane, I muttered. Think about it, he said. If you really care about fixing our relationship, you'll do this for me. I laughed bitterly. This isn't about fixing anything. This is you trying to make me pay for something that was never my fault. Marcus's tone turned ice cold. I'll give you a few days to think it over, he said. If you don't do this, you'll never hear from me again. Consider it your last chance to make things right. Then, he hung up. When I told Natalie what happened, she was furious. Your brother is delusional, she said. You don't owe him a damn thing. My parents were just as shocked. After all these years, he finally calls, and this is what he wants, my mom muttered, shaking her head. We decided to have a sit-down with Marcus, a real conversation to figure out what was going on in his head. Was this really about Ivy? Or was there something deeper behind all of this? Maybe if we talked it out, we could finally put this all to rest. But I had no idea how badly this meeting was going to go. Because the moment we confronted Marcus, he went from blaming me for Ivy to accusing me of having an affair with her. After Marcus's insane demand for $50,000, my parents, Natalie, and I decided that we needed to sit down with him and talk. We needed to understand what was really going on. Was he serious about the money? Did he really believe I owed him for what happened with Ivy? Or was this about something deeper? I wasn't expecting us to magically fix everything overnight. But I at least thought we could get some closure. I was so wrong. We met at a quiet restaurant, hoping for a calm conversation. The moment Marcus sat down, I could feel the tension radiating off of him. He barely acknowledged our parents, didn't even glance at Natalie, and when he looked at me, it wasn't just anger. It was hatred. I had never seen that look on my brother's face before. The conversation started off tense but civil. My dad spoke first. Marcus, we don't understand where this is coming from, he said. You disappeared for 5 years, and now you're demanding money from your own brother? Help us understand. Marcus exhaled sharply and crossed his arms. It's simple, he said coldly. He ruined my life. He let Ivy destroy my reputation. He let me waste years of my time on a woman who never loved me. The least he can do is pay me back for it. I sighed. Marcus, I didn't let anything happen, I said. I never encouraged Ivy. I never even liked her as a friend, let alone anything else. That's when Marcus's face darkened. And then, he said something that made my stomach drop. I don't believe you, he said. I froze. What? Marcus leaned forward, his jaw clenched. I don't believe you, he repeated. I think you were hooking up with Ivy behind my back. I blinked, completely speechless. Are you out of your mind? I finally said. You're telling me that a woman who spent years lying to my girlfriends, bullying Natalie, and making my life miserable was actually my secret mistress? Marcus didn't back down. I don't know what happened between you two, he said. But I refuse to believe Ivy would have confessed her love for you like that unless you had given her some kind of reason to. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was insanity. Natalie slammed her hand on the table. Are you hearing yourself right now? She snapped. Your fiancé humiliated you in front of your entire family, and instead of blaming her, you're rewriting history so you can blame him instead? Marcus's eyes flickered to her for the first time that night. Of course, you'd defend him, he said bitterly. You stole him from Ivy. Natalie laughed in disbelief. Oh, so now I'm the villain, too, she said. Let's be clear, Marcus, Ivy didn't lose him. She never had him. My mom, who had been quiet up until now, finally spoke up. Marcus, sweetheart, I don't know what's going on with you, but this isn't healthy, she said gently. You've carried this anger for 5 years. It's time to let it go. Marcus scoffed. Let it go, he repeated. So what, Mom? I should just pretend none of this happened? That my own brother didn't betray me? My dad shook his head. Marcus, your brother didn't betray you, he said firmly. The only person who betrayed you was Ivy. And instead of dealing with that, you cut us all off for 5 years and came back demanding money. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish with this? Marcus's expression hardened. I want him to suffer the way I suffered, he admitted. And there it was. He didn't want money. He wanted revenge. It was never about Ivy. It was never about the $50,000. It was about hurting me. And at that moment, I realized something that broke my heart. Marcus was never going to let this go. No matter what I said, no matter how much time passed. He had already made up his mind about me. I took a deep breath and finally said. Then I guess this is where we say goodbye. Marcus flinched. What? I've spent years trying to fix things with you, I said. I've called. I've texted. I've reached out over and over. And every single time, you ignored me. Now, after 5 years, you come back into my life just to tell me you hate me? That you want me to suffer? What kind of brother does that? Marcus glared at me. You did this to yourself, he spat. No, Marcus, I said, standing up. You did this. You chose to throw away your family over a woman who never even loved you. And now, you're too bitter to admit that you're angry at the wrong person. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. If you walk out of here right now, we're done, he said, his voice low. I looked him in the eye. We've been done for 5 years, I said. And then, I walked out. My parents followed. Natalie followed. Marcus didn't stop us. He just sat there, alone. And I haven't heard from him since. Final thoughts. It's been 4 months since that conversation. At first, I kept wondering if I could have done something differently. But now, I realize the truth. I was never the villain in this story. Ivy was. And Marcus let her ruin his relationship with me, our family, and himself. My parents have stopped reaching out to him. They're heartbroken, but they've accepted that he doesn't want to be part of our lives. And as for me? I've let go. I've stopped chasing after a brother who refuses to see reason. I have Natalie. I have a family of my own now. In fact, Natalie is pregnant. And even though Marcus doesn't know it, he's going to be an uncle. But after everything he's done, I doubt he'd care. And honestly, for the first time in years, I don't care either. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.